Story 1. The Loop on Highway 287. Marcus Chun had been driving long haul for 17 years, and he prided himself on knowing every major route between Denver and Dallas like the back of his weathered hands. Highway 287 through the Texas Panhandle was one of his regulars, a straight shot of asphalt cutting through endless plains, the kind of road where you could set the cruise control and let your mind wander. That night in late September, under a moonless sky that pressed down like black velvet, Marcus was hauling refrigerated pharmaceuticals, making good time on his overnight run. He'd left Amarillo around 11 p.m., fully fueled, thermos full of coffee, his CB radio crackling with occasional chatter from other drivers fighting off sleep with crude jokes and traffic updates. The temperature had dropped to the low 50s, and a light fog was rolling across the flatlands. Nothing unusual for this time of year. Marcus had his playlist going, classic rock mixed with some audiobook chapters he'd been meaning to finish. His GPS showed him passing through the small town of Claude, then continuing southeast toward the even smaller community of Goodnight. Population, maybe 200 on a good day. Around 1:30 a.m., Marcus noticed a mile marker, 107. He made a mental note because he knew a good truck stop was coming up around mile marker 95, where he planned to take a quick break. The fog was getting thicker, reducing visibility to maybe 50 yards, so he eased off the gas a bit, dropping from 70 to 60. His headlights cut pale tunnels through the mist, and the center line became his only reliable guide. The radio had gone quiet, not even static, just dead air. He reached down to fiddle with it, thinking maybe he'd accidentally hit the squelch when he passed another mile marker. Mile marker 107. Marcus blinked, glanced at his GPS. It showed him progressing normally, the little blue dot creeping southeast along the highway. But he definitely just passed mile marker 107 again. He checked his odometer. He'd traveled 2.3 miles since the first marker. That made no sense. He shook his head, blamed fatigue playing tricks, and kept driving. The fog swirled in hypnotic patterns in his headlights. 5 minutes later, another mile marker emerged from a mist. Mile marker 107. This time, Marcus felt a cold finger trace down his spine. He immediately checked everything. GPS still showing normal progression. Odometer still climbing, speedometer steady at 60. But there it was, clear as day in his headlights. The green reflective sign reading 107 in white numbers. He grabbed his CB radio. Breaker, breaker, this is Nighthawk. Anyone on this channel? Nothing but that empty silence. He tried his cell phone. No signal, which wasn't entirely unusual out here. But combined with everything else, it felt wrong. He decided to stop. This was getting too weird. Marcus started slowing down, looking for a safe spot on the shoulder. His headlights caught something in the distance. Another truck, parked halfway on the shoulder, hazards blinking. Relief flooded through him. Another driver. Someone to confirm he wasn't losing his mind. As he approached, he could make out more details. It was a Peterbilt blue cab pulling a refrigerated trailer, just like his own rig. Exactly like his own rig. Marcus felt his hands go numb on the steering wheel. Same model year, same company logo on the door, same custom chrome exhaust stacks he'd installed himself. As he rolled past, he saw the license plate, his truck, and there, in the driver's seat, visible through the window, was a figure slumped over the steering wheel. Marcus couldn't see the face, but he saw the red and black flannel shirt, the same shirt he was wearing. His foot slammed on the accelerator. The engine roared, and his rig lurched forward, tires screaming. The fog seemed to clutch at him, thick as cotton, and his heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He pushed the truck to 75, then 80, watching his mirrors obsessively. The parked truck vanished into the mist behind him. His breathing came in ragged gasps. The GPS flickered, went dark, then came back on. He was approaching mile marker 108. Thank God. Moving forward. Escaping whatever the hell that was. Mile marker 107. No. Marcus heard himself saying, his voice high and strained. He checked the odometer. It had reset. The trip meter showed 0 miles. But he was still moving, still driving, the engine still running. Time on his dashboard clock, 1:47 a.m. He could have sworn it had been past 2 o'clock. His hands trembled as he gripped the wheel tighter, the fog pressing closer. And now, he noticed something else. The center line was perfect. Too perfect. Not a single crack, no repairs, no tar patches, just an absolutely pristine yellow stretching endlessly ahead. He tried the CB again. Is anyone out there? Anyone? Please, I need help. His own voice answered back, delayed by a second. Is anyone out there? Anyone? Please, I need help. Not an echo. Not quite. The tone was different. Desperate in a way that his own plea hadn't been. Like it had been repeated many times. Worn down by repetition into something hollow. That's when Marcus saw the mile marker ahead and made a split-second decision. He cranked the wheel hard right, taking his 30-ton rig off the road. The truck bounced violently as it hit the dirt shoulder, and Marcus fought to control it. Grass and gravel sprang up around him. He kept going, steering perpendicular to the highway, crashing through scrub brush and over rough terrain. His cargo shifted with crashes that he'd have to pay for later, but he didn't care. He needed to get away from that road. The truck bucked and jolted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute. Then his headlights found another road, a smaller two-lane highway running north-south. Without hesitation, Marcus yanked the wheel left and bounced up onto the pavement. His GPS was completely black now, dead, but ahead he could see lights. Blessed lights. A gas station, maybe half a mile up. He pushed toward it like a drowning man swimming for shore. The fog thinned as he approached. It was a rundown Love's truck stop. Half the letters on the sign burned out. Marcus pulled in, his entire body shaking, and parked under the harsh fluorescent lights. He sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing, watching the normal world around him. 2 other trucks were parked nearby. He could see the cashier through the window, reading a magazine. Normal. Real. When he finally got out, his legs barely supported him. He went inside, bought a coffee he didn't want, and asked the cashier about the road. That highway 287 out there, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. You ever hear anything weird about it? Like, strange stuff happening? The cashier, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, looked at him for a long moment. You came from 287? He nodded. She glanced at the other customer, then back to Marcus. We get a driver in here about once a month. Same look you got. Same question. I don't know what's out there, but I know enough to tell you what I tell them. Find another route. Marcus never drove Highway 287 again. He took every detour, added hours to his trips, didn't care about the extra fuel costs. He filed a report with his company about the cargo damage, said he'd swerved to avoid a deer. They believed him because Marcus had never had an incident in 17 years. But sometimes late at night, highway under a dark sky, he wonders about the figure he saw slumped in that identical truck. He wonders if somewhere on Highway 287, his other self is still driving, still passing mile marker 107, still trying to find a way out of a loop that has no end. And he wonders what would have happened if he looked closer at that face. Story 2. The facility off exit 43. Denise Hartwell had been driving for Patterson Freight for 8 years, specializing in overnight deliveries across the Midwest. She knew the routes, knew which truck stops had the cleanest restrooms, knew where the state troopers liked to hide with their radar guns. At 42, she was a professional in every sense, with a perfect safety record and a reputation for always delivering on time. That's why they gave her the rush job on that cold November night, a load of medical equipment that needed to be in Minneapolis by 6 a.m. She'd picked up the cargo in Des Moines around 9 p.m., the manifest listing various pieces of diagnostic machinery bound for 3 different hospitals. The route was simple: Interstate 35 north, straight shot, about 4 hours with 1 fuel stop. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 30s, light traffic. Perfect conditions. Denise settled into her seat, adjusted her mirrors, and rolled out with a full tank and half a sandwich from a deli she liked. The first 2 hours were utterly routine. She passed through small Iowa towns, their lights twinkling in the darkness, listening to a true crime podcast through her earbuds. Around 11:15, somewhere south of the Minnesota border, Her low fuel light came on. That was odd. She should have had plenty of fuel. But the gauge didn't lie. She'd need to stop sooner than planned. Denise checked her trucking GPS of the nearest station and found one listed at exit 43, just 8 miles ahead. She didn't remember a truck stop there, but the system showed it clear as day. Pete's Fuel and Service, 24 hours. Exit 43 came up quickly, the sign illuminated in her headlights. But instead of a usual cluster of gas station lights, she saw only darkness beyond the off-ramp. She hesitated for a second, but her fuel gauge was now reading below a quarter tank and dropping visibly. That was wrong. Fuel gauges didn't drop that fast, but she was committed now. She took the exit. The ramp curved down and to the right, longer than most exit ramps, descending more steeply than seemed right for Iowa's gentle terrain. At the bottom was a two-lane road, poorly maintained, with faded yellow lines. Her GPS insisted the fuel station was 0.8 miles west, so she turned left, watching her gauges nervously. The fuel needle was still dropping, now reading below 1/8 of a tank. That was impossible. She'd completely in Des Moines. The road cut through absolutely flat farmland, but Denise couldn't see any farmhouses. No lights anywhere except her own headlights. Then, ahead, she spotted a glow. As she got closer, she saw it. A truck stop that looked like it had been pulled straight from the 1960s. A large canopy covered 4 old-style fuel pumps, the kind with the rolling number displays instead of digital readouts. The main building was a squat concrete structure with small windows that cast yellow light across the parking lot. A vintage neon sign read, Pete's Fuel and Service, exactly as her GPS had promised. Denise pulled up to the pump island, and her engine immediately sputtered and died. Fuel tank empty. She sat there for a moment, unsettled by the timing. It was as if the truck had calculated exactly how far it could go. She grabbed her wallet and stepped out into the cold night air. It was absolutely silent. No traffic sounds, no wind, nothing. The kind of silence that felt physical, oppressive. The pumps were ancient, probably from the 60s or 70s, but they looked maintained, clean. She tried to use her fuel card on the first pump, but there was no card reader, just a mechanical dial and a key lock. A handwritten sign said, Prepay inside. Denise walked toward the building, her boots loud on the concrete. Through the window, she could see a counter, shelves stocked with goods, everything illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed audibly. She pushed open the door and a bell jingled. Behind the counter stood a man, maybe 60, wearing a clean but outdated uniform with Pete embroidered on the chest. He looked up and smiled, and something about that smile made Denise's skin crawl. It was too wide, too enthusiastic, like he'd been waiting specifically for her. Evening, miss. Fuel tonight? His voice had a strange quality, like it was being broadcast through a speaker. Yeah, I need to fill up. Pump 3. Absolutely. That'll be, let's see. He consulted a clipboard, running his finger down a list. You're hauling medical equipment to Minneapolis. 3 stops. Running late due to fuel concerns. That'll be no charge tonight. Denise felt ice form in her stomach. How do you know what I'm hauling? Pete's smile never wavered. Oh, we know all our customers. Special service. Pumps unlocked. Fill her up. She wanted to leave, wanted to run, but her truck was bone dry. She had no choice. Fine, thanks. She turned to go, then stopped. What is this place? I've driven this route dozens of times and never seen this exit before. We're only here when we're needed, Pete said, and his smile finally something more serious, almost sad. You should hurry, though. You don't want to be here when the facility opens. What facility? He pointed out the window, toward the darkness beyond the parking lot. Denise looked and saw, maybe 200 yards away, another structure. It was massive, a sprawling industrial building with no windows, no signs, just smooth concrete walls and a single large door with a red light above it. She hadn't noticed it when she pulled in. What is that? Fuel's ready, Pete said instead of answering. I'd fill up quickly if I were you. Denise went back outside, and sure enough, pump 3 was unlocked. She began fueling, watching mechanical numbers roll. but her eyes kept drifting to that building. The red light above the door was pulsing now, slowly, like a heartbeat. As she watched, the large door began to roll upward with a grinding mechanical sound that broke the awful silence. Light spilled out from inside, painfully bright, sterile white. Denise saw figures moving in there, people in what looked like hazmat suits, pushing gurneys. On those gurneys were shapes under sheets, but the sheets weren't lying flat. The shapes underneath were wrong. Too many angles, too many joints, lumps and protrusions that didn't match human anatomy. The fuel pump clicked off. Full tank. But Denise couldn't move. She watched as the figures wheeled the gurneys out into the parking lot, heading in a line toward a row of refrigerated trailers parked on the far side of the facility. Trailers she hadn't noticed before. They were opening the back doors, loading the gurneys inside. "You should go now." Pete was standing right behind her, and she hadn't heard him approach. "They'll be done loading soon, and then they'll need another driver." Another driver for what? Those need to be delivered. Special cargo. They always need drivers who stay too long. Denise looked at the trailers, then at her own trailer, her medical equipment. She suddenly needed to check her cargo. She fumbled with the keys, got the back doors open, and shined her flashlight inside. The medical equipment was still there, still secured, but now there was something else. In the very back, behind the legitimate cargo, were 3 large containers she didn't remember loading. They were unmarked, made of brushed steel, with biohazard symbols stenciled on the sides. And they were humming, a low vibration she could feel in her bones. "Those weren't on my manifest," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They are now," Pete said, "or you can leave them here. But you have to decide now. The facility crews will be done in 3 minutes, and they'll come check the other trucks. If you're still here, you're theirs. They'll have you hauling their cargo permanently. Route 7 runs for, and drivers don't come back from it." Denise made a decision. She slammed the trailer doors, ran to her cab, and fired up the engine. It started immediately, fuel gauge reading full. She threw the truck into gear and peeled out, not caring about the squeal of tires. In her mirrors, she saw Pete standing under the lights, watching her go. He raised one hand in a wave. Behind him, the figures in hazmat suits had stopped and turned to face her direction, all of them perfectly still, perfectly synchronized. She found the road leading back to the exit ramp and pushed her truck as hard as it would go. Behind her, she heard a sound like a siren, but deeper, more resonant, coming from the facility. The red light was flashing rapidly now. She hit the ramp and accelerated up the steep incline, her engine roaring. At the top, she merged back onto Interstate 35, and suddenly there were other cars, other trucks, normal traffic. The world snapped back into regular existence. Denise drove straight to Minneapolis, didn't stop, barely breathed. When she arrived and opened her trailer for unloading, the 3 steel containers were gone. Only her medical equipment remained, exactly as originally loaded. The manifest showed nothing unusual. She asked the loading crew if they'd removed anything. They looked at her like she was crazy. She reported the Exit 43 experience to her company, said the GPS had glitched. They checked their systems. There was no Exit 43 on that stretch of Interstate 35. The exits jumped from 41 to 47. Denise requested a route change after that. Anything but I-35. They accommodated her because she was a valued driver. But sometimes late at night, she dreams about those shapes under the sheets, about the wrong angles and impossible joints. And she wonders what would have been in those steel containers, what cargo she almost delivered. Most of all, she wonders about Route 7, the one Pete mentioned, and she wonders if somewhere other drivers are on it right now, hauling cargo they never agreed to carry, driving a road that has no end, serving a facility that shouldn't exist. Story 3. The Woman in the Rest Area. Trevor Banks was on his 3rd energy drink of the night, fighting exhaustion as he pushed his rig through the mountains of eastern Tennessee. He'd been driving for 12 hours, 1 hour past his legal limit. But he was so close to his delivery point in Knoxville that he decided to risk it. The clock on his dash read 3:47 a.m., and the winding mountain road seemed endless, each curve identical to the last. His load was furniture, nothing special, but the company wanted it there by 6 a.m. for an early morning delivery crew. He was just seriously considered pulling over for a quick power nap when he saw the sign for a rest area 1 mile ahead. Perfect timing. Trevor signaled, though there wasn't another vehicle in sight, and took the exit. The rest area was small, just a parking lot with restrooms, a few picnic tables, and one flickering streetlight that cast more shadows and illumination. Only one other vehicle was there, a beat-up sedan parked near the building. Trevor pulled into a spot, set his air brakes, and sat for a moment, rolling his shoulders to work out the tension. That's when he saw her, a woman standing near the restroom building, illuminated by the weak light. She was wearing a white dress that seemed to glow slightly in the darkness, completely inappropriate for the near-freezing temperature. Her hair was long and dark, hanging loose around her shoulders. She was just standing there, perfectly still, facing his direction. Something about the scene felt wrong. No woman should be at a remote rest area alone at 4 in the morning. Trevor's first thought was that she needed help. Maybe car trouble, maybe worse. He grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The cold air bit into his face immediately. His breath came out in clouds. "Ma'am, you okay?" His voice echoed strangely in the empty rest area. The woman didn't respond, didn't move. Now that he was closer, maybe 30 feet away, Trevor could see more details. The dress was old-fashioned, like something from the 40s or 50s, with a high collar and long sleeves. Her feet were bare on the cold pavement. Her face was pale, almost luminous, with dark eyes that seemed too large. And she was still completely motionless, not even swaying, not breathing that he could see. "Ma'am, do you need help? Are you hurt?" Slowly, very slowly, her head tilted to the side. The movement was wrong, too smooth, like it was on a mechanism rather than a neck. Then she smiled, her mouth open far too wide, stretching her face in a way that made Trevor's stomach turn. And she spoke, her voice clear but strange, like multiple voices layered over each other. "Will you give me a ride?" Every instinct Trevor had screamed at him to run. He took a step backward, keeping his flashlight pointed at her. "I can't. I'm sorry. I can call someone for you. Highway patrol, they can help." Her head tilted the other direction, that same mechanical smoothness. "I've been waiting so long. So many drivers passed by. But you stopped. You can see me. That means you're the one. You'll give me a ride." "No, ma'am, I really can't. I need to go." Trevor was backing toward his truck now, not wanting to turn his back on her. The woman moved. Walk. She glided, her feet not quite touching the ground, closing the distance between them impossibly fast. Trevor panicked and ran, his boots pounding on the pavement. He reached his truck, grabbed the door handle, and hauled himself up. He could hear her behind him, that strange voice saying, "You stopped. You stopped. You have to take me." He slammed the door, hit the lock, and fired up the engine. His headlights illuminated the parking lot, and there she was, right in front of his truck, standing in the direct beam of his lights. But she cast no shadow. The light went through her, and he could see the restroom building behind her through her translucent form. Her mouth was still stretched in that horrible smile. Trevor threw the truck into reverse, backing up wildly, his trailer swinging. He cranked the wheel, shifted into forward, and punched the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, and he expected to feel the impact, expected to hit her. But there was nothing. The woman vanished like smoke as his truck passed through where she'd been standing. He tore out of the rest area, back onto highway, his heart hammering so hard he thought he might have a heart attack. In his mirrors, he could see the rest area receding into the darkness. The woman was standing in the middle of the lot again, perfectly still, watching him go. Trevor drove for another hour before his hands stopped shaking enough to safely pull over at a well-lit truck stop with dozens of other vehicles. He went inside, ordered coffee he couldn't taste, and sat in a booth under bright lights, surrounded by normal people. A waitress came by, refilled his cup, and asked if he was okay. He must have looked as bad as he felt. "Just tired," he said. "Long night." "You look like you've seen a ghost, honey." Trevor laughed, but it came out bitter. Maybe I did. He asked about the rest area, described the location. The waitress's expression changed, became guarded. That's rest area 12. You didn't stop there, did you? Yeah. Why? She sat down across from him, uninvited, and lowered her voice. Drivers talk. That rest area. There's something wrong with it. Been reports for years about a woman in a white dress. Story goes she died there in the 50s. Her and her husband had an accident. Car went off the road just before the rest area. Husband died instantly. Wife made it up to the rest area, trying to flag down help, but she was hurt bad, internal injuries. Died waiting for someone to stop. Now she's still there, still waiting, still trying to get someone to help her. That's just a legend, Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, but enough drivers have seen something that the state was going to close that rest area down. Never did. And people keep reporting the same thing. Woman in a white dress, always asking for a ride. The ones who say yes, she paused. They don't usually talk about what happens next, but I know 2 drivers who did. Both of them said she got in the truck, sat in the passenger seat, didn't say a word, just pointed forward. They drove where she pointed. Ended up on back roads they didn't recognize. Both of them finally got so scared they stopped the truck and ran. When they came back with cops, their trucks were empty. No woman. But both trucks had been driven. Odometers showed hundreds of extra miles. Fuel nearly empty. And both of them said they could smell something terrible in the cab afterward. Death. Decay. Took weeks to get the smell out. Trevor felt sick. What happened to those drivers? One quit driving entirely. The other one, he kept driving but avoided Tennessee altogether. Last I heard, he was out west, wouldn't come east of the Mississippi. She stood up, patted his shoulder. You did the right thing, not giving her a ride. Some things you just don't help. Some things are beyond helping. Trevor finished his delivery to Knoxville, but he was useless the rest of the day, jumping at shadows, unable to focus. He filed a report with his company, said he'd seen a suspicious person at a rest area and felt it should be reported to police. They thanked him and said they'd pass along. He never mentioned the supernatural aspects. Who would believe him? For months afterward, Trevor took every route that avoided that stretch of highway, but the job sometimes demanded it, and eventually, inevitably, he found himself on that road again. It was daylight this time, mid-afternoon, and he told himself it would be fine. As he passed the exit for Rest Area 12, he looked. In the bright sunshine, it looked normal. Just a parking lot, restrooms, picnic tables. A family was there, kids running around, parents watching. Normal. But as Trevor's truck rolled past, he saw something that made his blood freeze. At the edge of the rest area, just at the tree line, standing in the shadows where the sunlight didn't quite reach, was a figure in a white dress. Even from the highway, even at 65 miles per hour, he could see her clearly. She was watching the highway, watching the trucks pass, waiting, always waiting. Trevor never stopped at a rest area in Tennessee again. He planned his routes to avoid them, stopped only at busy truck stops with lots of people and bright lights. But on sleepless nights, he sometimes wondered about other drivers, less cautious or less lucky. He wondered how many had stopped, how many had said yes to that terrible request, and where they'd ended up, because something told him that the woman in white was still there, still waiting at 12, still asking her question to anyone who could see her. And someday, someone would say yes again. Story 4. The CB radio broadcast. James Rodriguez had been a trucker for 23 years, starting right out of high school, and he'd heard every kind of chatter imaginable on the CB radio. Crude jokes, traffic warnings, conspiracy theories, lonely drivers just wanting someone to talk to in the dead of night. The CB was a trucker's lifeline, a connection to other people in the isolation of the road. James kept his tune to Channel 19, the main trucker channel, and he prided himself on knowing most of the regular voices on his routes. That February night, hauling a load of auto parts from Detroit to Atlanta, James was passing through the hills of Kentucky around 2 in the morning. It was cold, snow flurries occasionally hitting his windshield, but the roads were clear and traffic was light. He'd been listening to the usual CB chatter. A couple of drivers complaining about construction near Lexington. Someone else warning about a speed trap near the Tennessee border. Standard stuff. Then the new voice came on. It was male, young, maybe early 20s. The voice had a slight southern accent and an urgency that immediately caught James's attention. Breaker, breaker. This is Danny on Interstate 75 southbound. I need help. Something's following me. Mile marker 38. Can anyone hear me? James checked his GPS. He was on I-75 southbound himself, approaching mile marker 52. The voice was maybe 20 minutes behind him. He grabbed his CB mic. This is Rodriguez. I copy you, Danny. What's your 20 and what's following you? The response came back immediately, and James could hear the fear in it. I'm at mile marker 40 now. There's a vehicle behind me. Been tailing me for 30 miles. No lights, but I can see in my mirrors when other cars pass. It's big like a truck, but wrong. The shape is wrong, and it's getting closer. Another voice cut in, gruff and experienced. This is Holler One. Danny, you sure you're not just seeing things? You've been driving long tonight? I'm not seeing things. The young man's voice went up an octave. It's right there. It doesn't have a front grille, just a smooth black surface, and the cab is too tall and, oh God, it's next to me now. James felt a chill. He could hear genuine terror in Danny's voice. Danny, can you see a driver? What's it doing? Static. Then, there's no driver. The cab is dark, but I can see through the windows. There's nobody in there, but it's matching my speed exactly, staying right next to me in the other lane. Mile marker 40. Please, somebody help me. Several other voices chimed in now, drivers offering advice. Speed up, slow down, take the next exit, call the cops. But Danny's voice just got more frantic. I tried slowing down. It slows down with me. I tried speeding up. Same thing. It's like it's locked onto me. And there's something on the sides of the trailer, symbols or writing, but it's not English, not any language I've ever seen. They're glowing red. James was driving faster now, pushing 75, trying to close the distance. Something about this felt horribly real. Danny, I'm at mile marker 56 now, heading your direction. Just hold on, I'll catch up to you. Mile marker 45, Danny's voice was shaking. It's moving ahead of me now, pulling in front. I can see the back of the trailer. The doors are opening. The doors are opening while it's driving. There's light inside, really bright, and shapes things that aren't. The transmission cut to static, pure white noise. James and several other drivers called out, trying to raise Danny, but got nothing. Then, after about 30 seconds, the voice came back, but it was different. Still Danny's voice, still the same slight accent, but flat now, emotionless, like someone reading from a script with no feeling. This is Danny. I'm at mile marker 47. Everything is fine. The truck is gone. I was mistaken. It was just fatigue. I'm gonna pull over and rest now. Don't look for me. Everything is fine. Danny, what happened? James pressed the mic. Are you okay? Everything is fine. Same flat tone. Don't look for me. Continue on your routes. Everything is fine. Then silence. The CB went completely dead, not even static. James looked at his radio. It was still on, still powered, but producing no sound at all. He fiddled with the knobs, changed channels, came back to 19. Nothing. It was like every CB radio in range had simultaneously died. James reached mile marker 47 5 minutes later. He was scanning the roadside, looking for any sign of a pulled over truck, any indication of what had happened to Danny. There was nothing. He passed 47, then 46, 45, working his way back through the mile markers Danny had called out. No stop trucks, no accident, no vehicles at all except normal traffic. At mile marker 38, where Danny had first called for help, James saw something that made him hit his brakes. There was a truck pulled over on the shoulder, hazards flashing. It looked normal from a distance. A red cab, white trailer. But as James slowed down, approaching cautiously, he saw the details that were wrong. The proportions were slightly off, the cab a bit too tall, the trailer a bit too long. The windows were dark, completely black, like they'd been painted over, and there was no license plate. James's CB suddenly crackled back to life. Danny's voice, still in that flat, emotionless tone. Rodriguez, don't stop. Keep driving. You can't help. I'm part of the route now. Danny, where are you? I'm everywhere on this highway now. I'm part of the route. The truck needed a driver. I'm the driver now. I'll always be the driver now. Don't stop. Don't ever stop for the black truck. James felt his hands shaking on the wheel. Against every instinct, he started accelerating, pulling past the parked truck. As he did, he glanced in his mirrors. The truck's hazard lights turned off. Then its headlights came on, except they weren't normal headlights. They were too bright, too white, almost like searchlights. The truck began moving, pulling onto the highway behind him. James pushed his rig as fast as it would safely go, weaving through the sparse traffic, his eyes locked on his mirrors. The black truck stayed back there, maintaining a steady distance of about a quarter mile, those brilliant white lights never wavering. His CB crackled continuously now with Danny's voice, repeating the same phrases over and over. Part of the route now. I'm the driver. Don't stop. Part of the route. Another voice broke through, a woman this time. This is Sheila. I can see it too. The black truck. It's behind me on 75 northbound, mile marker 62. It appeared out of nowhere. Someone help. Then a third voice, older man, terrified. It's following me on Route 64, heading west. How is it in multiple places? How is this possible? The CB exploded with voices now. Drivers all across the region reporting the same thing. A black truck with no driver, appearing behind them, following, those two bright lights illuminating the night. And through it all, Danny's flat voice, repeating his warnings and descriptions, layered with other voices now. Other names, people claiming to be part of the route now. James took the next exit, a small state road leading to a town called Milton. He had to get off the interstate. The black truck followed him down the exit ramp. But as soon as James turned onto the small state road, the truck stopped at the bottom of the ramp. It just sat there, lights blazing, as James sped away. In his mirror, he watched it execute a perfect turn and head back up the on-ramp, returning to... He pulled into a 24-hour diner in Milton and sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, listening to CB. The reports continued. Drivers all over the southeastern United States reporting encounters with the black truck. It would follow for a while, then disappear. No one reported being forced off the road or crashed. The truck just followed, got close, and eventually either disappeared or was left behind when drivers exited the interstate. But the voices on the CB grew. More people claiming to be part of the route now. Each voice had a name: Danny, Sheila, Marcus, Jennifer, Tom, and they all repeated similar phrases in that same emotionless monotone. James started writing down the names. He counted 17 by the time the sun came up. When daylight broke, the report stopped. The strange voices went silent. The CB returned to normal chatter. James sat in that diner parking lot, drinking coffee, trying to process what he'd experienced. He considered calling the police, but what would he say? That a ghost truck had chased him? That people on the radio claimed to be absorbed into some kind of vehicular consciousness? He went inside the diner and asked the waitress if there had been any accidents on I-75 recently. She checked her phone, looked at local news. Nothing major. There was a truck driver went missing about 2 months ago. Danny something. Left Detroit, never made it to his destination. They found his rig abandoned at a rest stop. No sign of him. Still unsolved. James felt his stomach drop. Danny. Was his name Danny? Yeah, I think so. Why? No reason. Just thought I heard about that. James made his delivery to Atlanta, but he drove surface roads a whole way, avoiding the interstate entirely. It took him an extra 6 hours. He didn't care. When he got back to his home base, he requested a route change. No more southern runs. His company thought it was odd. His southern route was his bread and butter, but they accommodated him. He still drives, still uses a CB, but he never keys up if he hears those flat, emotionless voices claiming to be part of route. And sometimes late at night, on roads far from I-75, he'll see lights in his mirror that are just a bit too bright, a bit too white. He'll see a shape that's almost right, but not quite. And he'll take the next exit, no matter where it leads, and wait until those lights disappear before continuing. Because James knows the truth. Somewhere out there, on the interstates that web across America, there's a black truck with no driver. Or maybe it has 17 drivers now, or more, and it's always looking for the next one to add to its route. Story 5. The car wasn't there. Patricia Trish Morrison had driven for 12 years without incident, hauling everything from electronics to livestock across the Pacific Northwest. At 36, she was known among dispatchers as someone who'd take any load, any route, any time. That's why she got the call on a rainy October evening to pick up an emergency cargo from a warehouse in rural Oregon, just outside Eugene. The dispatcher said it was medical supplies needed in Seattle by morning. Time-sensitive but not hazardous. Standard paperwork. Good pay for the rush job. Trish drove her rig to the address, a warehouse complex off Highway 126, tucked into forest far from any town. She arrived around 8 p.m., rain hammering on her windshield, darkness settling into the trees. The warehouse was a big metal building with a loading dock and a small office attached. Only a few lights were on, giving the place a dim, unwelcoming glow. One other vehicle was there, a black sedan parked near the office. She backed her trailer up to the loading dock and walked to the office. A man was waiting there mid-40s, wearing a suit that seemed out of place in a warehouse. He had her paperwork ready, everything properly filled out. Bill of lading, customs forms, delivery instructions. The cargo was listed as medical research materials, temperature controlled, fragile, sealed container. It's already loaded, the man said, handing her the paperwork. Sealed container. Don't open it. Don't break the seals. Very important. Temperature needs to stay between 35 and 40 degrees. Your refrigeration unit is already running. Just deliver it to this address in Seattle. He gave her a card with an address. Can I inspect the cargo? Trish asked. I always check what I'm hauling. The container is sealed for sterility. Opening it would contaminate the contents. You signed the specialized transport agreement when you accepted the load. He pointed to her paperwork. Sure enough, there was a clause about not inspecting sealed medical containers. Something fell off, but Trish needed the money and the paperwork was legitimate. She took the documents, walked around back, and checked her trailer. The doors were closed and sealed with numbered tags. She checked the refrigeration unit. Running properly, temperature reading 38 degrees. Everything looked normal. She climbed into her cab and started the long drive north to Seattle. The rain intensified as she drove through the Cascade Mountains, visibility dropping to almost nothing. The road twisted through the darkness, and Trish focused on keeping her rig steady on the wet pavement. She had the radio on, listening to classic rock, trying to stay alert. Around midnight, about halfway to Seattle, a thump from the back of the trailer. Not a road bump. Something hidden inside of the trailer. Trish frowned. Medical supplies shouldn't shift like that. Everything should be secured. She listened carefully over the rain and engine noise. There was again, thump, and then another, rhythmic, like something knocking. Her first thought was that the cargo had come loose and was sliding around, but the refrigerated trailer should have been properly packed to prevent that. The thumping continued, growing more frequent. Thump, thump, thump. A steady beat. Trish looked for a place to pull over, but the mountain road had no shoulders, just narrow lanes with steep drops on one side and rock face on the other. She'd have to wait for a turnout or a rest area. The knocking got louder, more insistent. It sounded like someone hammering on the inside of the trailer. That's when Trish heard it, a voice on her CB radio, faint and crackling, barely audible over the static. Let me out. Just those 3 words. She grabbed the mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. No response. but the knocking in the trailer intensified. Now it sounded like multiple points of impact, as if several fists were pounding on the inside walls. Trish's heart raced. This wasn't cargo coming loose. This was something else. She spotted a pullout ahead, a small gravel area meant for emergency stops. She pulled in, set her brakes, grabbed her heavy flashlight and her phone. Signal was non-existent up here in the mountains. She got out into the pouring rain and walked to the back of her trailer, listening. The thumping had stopped. Complete silence except for the rain and her idling engine. Trish examined the seals on the doors. They were intact, numbered tags matching her paperwork. She put her ear against the cold metal of the trailer. Nothing. No sound at all. Then her CB radio crackled from the cab, the voice louder now. "Let me out, please. It's cold. Let me out." Trish ran back to the cab, grabbed the mic. "Who is this? How are you transmitting?" "Inside. I'm inside. Please. I can't breathe. Let me out." Trish felt panic rising. Was someone actually in her trailer? That was impossible. The cargo had been loaded before she arrived. The seals were intact, but the voice was desperate, pleading. She made a decision. She grabbed a knife from her toolbox and went back to the trailer. With shaking hands, she cut the seals and opened the doors. The refrigerated air spilled out, colder than it should be, well below the set temperature. Inside, lit by her flashlight, was a single large metal container, about 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, feet tall. It was unmarked except for a biohazard symbol and a number tag. The container had no visible locks, just a seamless metal surface with a hatch on top held down by mechanical clamps. The voice on the CB again. "Open it, please. I'm suffocating." Every rational part of Trish's mind screamed at her to close the doors, to call the authorities, to refuse to go further. But what if someone was really trapped in there? What if this was some kind of human trafficking situation? She climbed into the trailer and examined the container. The clamps were simple mechanical devices. She could open them. "Please hurry." The voice was weaker now. "Please." Trish released the clamps one by one. They opened with loud metallic clangs that echoed in the enclosed trailer. 4 clamps total. She pulled the last one, and immediately the hatch burst open from inside. Freezing vapor poured out, so cold it burned her lungs. She staggered back, coughing, and through the vapor she saw something rising from the container. It wasn't human. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but too thin, too long, with too many joints in its limbs. Its skin, if it was skin, was pale gray and seemed to shimmer like oil on water. It had a head, but the face was wrong. Features in the wrong places, eyes too large and completely black, mouth opening far too wide. As it emerged from the container, pulling itself up with those unnaturally jointed arms, it made a sound. Not words, despite what the CB had said. A sound like wind through a hollow pipe, like a scream played backwards. Trish ran. She jumped from the trailer, slipped in the mud, scrambled up, and sprinted for her cab. Behind her, she heard that sound again, closer. She grabbed the cab door, hauled herself up, and slammed it shut. Through her mirrors, she saw the thing standing at the back of the trailer, silhouetted by the interior light. It was impossibly tall, maybe 8 feet, and it was stepping down from the trailer onto the gravel. Trish released the brakes and hit the gas. Her truck lurched forward, tires spraying gravel, the trailer door still swinging open. She didn't care. She just needed to get away. She drove recklessly down the mountain road, her trailer swaying dangerously, rain obscuring everything. Behind her, in the mirrors, she saw nothing following. The pullout vanished into darkness. She drove for 20 minutes before her hands stopped shaking enough to think clearly. She pulled into a rest area that was blessedly well lit and populated with other trucks. She sat there, engine running, for a long time. Finally, she got out and checked her trailer. The doors were still open. Inside, the metal container sat there, hatch open, vapor still rising from it. But the container was empty. Whatever had been inside was gone. Trish called the number on the delivery card. It rang and rang, No answer. She called her dispatcher. No answer. It was 3 in the morning. She looked at the delivery address. Something made her look it up on her phone. Using the weak signal she could get, the address didn't exist. The street name was right, but the number didn't correspond to any building. She looked up the warehouse address where she'd picked up the cargo. According to satellite images on her phone, there was no warehouse complex at that location, just forest. Trish made a decision. She closed and secured the trailer doors, container and all, and drove to the nearest police station. It was a small-town sheriff's office, barely staffed at that hour, but she told them everything. The cargo, the voice, the creature. They looked at her like she was insane or on drugs, but they agreed to check the trailer. They opened it with her. The container was gone, completely gone. The trailer was empty except for some frost on the floor. The deputies asked if she was feeling okay, if she'd been drinking. They couldn't file a report about missing cargo if there was no evidence cargo had ever existed. The paperwork she had showed a standard medical supplies delivery, but when they called the phone number on the bill of lading, it was disconnected. The warehouse address led nowhere. They sent her home, suggested she get some rest. Trish never made a delivery to Seattle because there was nothing to deliver and nowhere to deliver it to. Her dispatcher was confused when she called in the morning. They had no record of authorizing that pickup. No client had requested it. The phone call she'd received hadn't come from the dispatch office. When they checked, her truck's GPS showed she'd driven to the warehouse location, stopped for 20 minutes, then driven toward Seattle and stopped at the police station. No stops in between. No pull-out in the mountains. The system showed her trailer had been empty the entire time. Trish quit driving for 6 months. She couldn't explain what had happened, couldn't make sense of it. The authorities investigated but found nothing. No warehouse, no client, no cargo. But Trish knew what she'd seen. She'd opened that container. She'd seen that thing. And the question that haunted her wasn't what it was or where it came from. The question was, where did it go? She'd driven through small towns, past homes, past truck stops filled with people. She left the trailer doors open for 20 minutes while she fled. What if it had gotten out somewhere populated? She eventually went back to driving, needing the income, but she never accepted another emergency pickup. She never hauled sealed cargo. And sometimes, late at night, she'll hear a voice on the CB radio, faint and distant, saying, "Let me out, please, let me out." And she wonders how many other drivers are out there, hauling containers they don't inspect, cargo they don't question, releasing things into the world that should never have been transported at all. Story 6. The Road That Moved. Carl Jennings had been driving the same route for 6 years, Portland, Oregon to Boise, Idaho, every Tuesday and Friday. He knew every curve, every hill, every mile marker on Highway 84 through Columbia River Gorge. It was monotonous work, but Carl liked predictability. At 52, with 2 decades of driving behind him, he appreciated a route he could do in his sleep. He hauled dry goods mostly, non-perishable foods for grocery store chains. Nothing exciting but steady work. That particular Tuesday in March was unremarkable. Clear skies, light traffic, his load of canned goods and box cereals secured properly in his trailer. He'd left Portland at 6 a.m., planning to make Boise by evening. The route took him east along the Columbia River, through dramatic scenery that he barely noticed anymore, then cut south toward Ontario and across into Idaho. He'd made this run hundreds of times. About 3 hours into the drive, somewhere past Hood River, Carl noticed something odd. There was a turn coming up that he didn't remember. The highway seemed to veer right, heading into a section of hills that looked wrong. He'd driven this stretch so many times he could picture with his eyes closed. It should have been a straight section here, running parallel to the river for another 10 miles. But his GPS showed him on the correct route, Highway 84, and the road sign confirmed it. Carl shrugged it off. Maybe they'd done construction, rerouted something. He hadn't driven this way in 4 days. Since Friday, things changed. He took the turn and immediately felt disoriented. The landscape was different. Instead of the open river valley, he was entering a narrow canyon with steep walls. The rock formations were wrong, more jagged, darker stone. And there were trees, thick pine forests where there should have been mostly scrubland and grass. He checked his GPS again. Still showing Highway 84, his blue positioned up, crawling along the map route. But what he was seeing through his windshield didn't match. The road was narrower, poorly maintained, with cracks in the pavement and no center line. This couldn't be right. Carl slowed down, looking for a place to pull over, to figure out what was happening. The road twisted deeper into the canyon. Carl's unease grew with every curve. He hadn't passed another vehicle in 15 minutes. No road sign, markers, nothing to indicate where he was. His CB radio picked up nothing but static. His cell phone had no signal. The GPS kept insisting he was on Highway 84, but that was clearly wrong now. Then the road began to change. At first, Carl thought it was his imagination, but no, the pavement ahead was actually shifting. He watched in disbelief as the road curved left, then seemed to ripple like water, and when it settled, the curve was going right instead. The trees on either side swayed though there was no wind. The rock walls of the canyon appeared to breathe, expanding and contracting slowly. Carl hit the brakes, bringing his rig to a stop in the middle of the road. This wasn't possible. Roads didn't move. He was hallucinating, maybe carbon monoxide in the cab, or he'd fallen asleep. And this was a dream. He pinched himself hard enough to leave a mark. The pain was real. He was awake, and the road ahead continued to shift, the pavement flowing like a river, changing direction, changing shape. He tried to back up, but when he looked in his mirrors, the road behind him was gone. Just trees, dense forest pressed up against his trailer. The road had closed behind him like a mouth swallowing its prey. Panic seized Carl's chest. Forward was the only option. He released the brake and started moving again, following the road that writhed and shifted like a living thing. The canyon narrowed further. Carl's truck barely fit, his mirrors almost scraping the rock walls on either side. The road went up at an impossible angle, steep enough that his transmission strained, then dropped down equally steep on the other side. His cargo shifted despite being secured, boxes crashing around in the trailer. The GPS went dark, the screen showing nothing but static. Time became meaningless. Carl couldn't tell if he'd been driving for 10 minutes or 10 hours. The sun seemed stuck in the same position in the sky, casting identical shadows no matter how far he went. The road twisted through landscapes that made no geological sense. One moment he was in a pine forest, the next in a desert, the next to what looked like a burned wasteland with blackened trees and ash-gray ground. And then he saw the other trucks. They were parked along the sides of the road or embedded in the road. It was hard to tell. 18-wheelers of various makes and models, some looking decades old, some modern. They were half sunk into the pavement, as if the road had absorbed them. Carl slowed as he passed them, peering at the cabs. Some were empty. Some had drivers inside, slumped over steering wheels, clearly dead, bodies desiccated and mummified. Some drivers looked fresh, recently deceased, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Carl counted as he passed, each one a monument to a driver who hadn't escaped this impossible road. He saw license plates from different states, different decades. One truck looked like a 1970s model. Another was clearly from the 1990s. Others were contemporary. How long had this road been trapping drivers? How many had died here? The road widened into a circular clearing, perfectly round, with smooth pavement forming a spiral pattern. In the center was a structure. It looked like a road sign, but massive, maybe 30 feet tall. It was made of the same material as the pavement, dark and slightly reflective. On it were symbols, not letters or numbers, but abstract shapes that hurt to look at, geometry that seemed to fold into dimensions Carl couldn't perceive. As he entered the clearing, his engine died. Just stopped, no cough or sputter, like someone had flipped a switch. His electrical systems went dead. No lights, no power, nothing. Carl sat in the sudden silence, illuminated only by the unchanging sunlight filtering through the trees that surrounded the clearing. He tried the ignition. Nothing. The key turned uselessly. The symbols on a massive sign began to glow, pulsing with a light that was somehow both bright and dark, a color that shouldn't exist. Carl felt pressure in his head, like the beginning of a migraine. He heard a sound, not through his ears but inside his skull, a low vibration that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. The spiral pattern on the pavement started to rotate, the entire clearing spinning slowly like a massive turntable. Carl knew with absolute certainty that if he stayed in the truck, he would die here. He would become another mummified corpse, another warning that future drivers would see and fail to heed. He grabbed his emergency kit, his flashlight, and kicked open his door. The spinning clearing made him immediately nauseous, but he jumped down and ran for the edge, for the tree line, anywhere that wasn't on that moving pavement. He made it to the trees and looked back. His truck was sinking. The pavement was swallowing it, exactly like the others he'd seen. The trailer went first, slowly descending into the road as if the asphalt had turned to quicksand. The cab tilted backward as it was pulled down. Carl watched his livelihood, his truck that he'd named Betty and had driven for 8 years, disappear into the road. The symbols on the sign pulsed brighter, and that sound in his head intensified until Carl thought his skull would crack. He turned and ran into the forest, branches whipping his face, his boots catching on roots. He ran without direction, just away, driven by pure survival instinct. The forest changed as he ran. Trees became thicker, then thinner, then weren't trees at all but tall structures of stone, then back to trees again. The shifted under his feet, sometimes dirt, sometimes pavement, sometimes something else he couldn't identify. Time lost meaning. Carl ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, and he collapsed against a tree, gasping. When he looked up, he saw a road. Not the impossible shifting road, but a normal highway. He could hear traffic. With the last of his strength, Carl staggered toward the sound and emerged onto the shoulder of a busy highway. Cars and trucks whizzed past at normal speeds. A green sign indicated he was on Highway 84, 2 miles from Hood River. He'd somehow made it back, or the road had released him. He didn't know which. A state trooper found him 20 minutes later, sitting on the guardrail, and took him to a hospital. Carl told him he'd had an accident, that his truck had gone off the road, and he hiked out. Search parties went looking based on his description, but found nothing. No truck, no signs of an accident, no tire marks or debris. Carl's truck and cargo simply vanished. The insurance company investigated, suspected fraud, but couldn't prove anything. There was no evidence at all. The company Carl worked for had to fire him. Without a truck and with an unexplained loss of cargo, they had no choice. Carl didn't fight it. He never drove professionally again. He got a job at a warehouse, something where his feet stayed on solid ground. But sometimes, when he's driving his personal car on familiar roads, he'll notice a turn he doesn't remember, a street that seems wrong, and he'll take a different route, make a U-turn, avoid that unfamiliar path. Because Carl knows the truth. Some roads don't lead anywhere humans are meant to go. Some roads are alive or serve something alive, and they're always hungry. They're always waiting for the next driver who takes the wrong turn, who follows the GPS even when reality insists something is wrong. And somewhere out there, his truck is still sinking into that spiral clearing, joining the others, a warning that will never be heeded because the road only appears to those it chooses to trap. Story 7. The Hitchhiker with No Reflection. Leonard Lenny Watts had a strict personal rule: never pick up hitchhikers. He'd been driving for 18 years and had heard all the horror stories. Drivers robbed, attacked, or worse by people they tried to help. But on that cold December night, driving through Montana on a route that was famous for its isolation, Lenny broke his rule. He would regret it for the rest of his life. He was hauling furniture from Seattle to Minneapolis, a long haul that he'd broken into 3 days of driving. This was the second night, and he was somewhere on Highway 200, east of Great Falls, in a stretch of road where towns were few and far between. The temperature had dropped to 15 below zero, and snow was falling heavily, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The weather report warned of blizzard conditions. Lenny was experienced enough to handle it, but he was anxious to find a place to wait out the worst of the storm. That's when he saw the figure on the side of the road. A man, standing near a mile marker, thumb out in the universal hitchhiker gesture. He was wearing jeans and a light jacket, completely inadequate for conditions. No hat, no gloves. Lenny's first instinct was to drive past. His rule was absolute. But something made him look in his mirror as he passed. The figure just stood there, not moving, snow accumulating on his shoulders. In this weather, that man would die within hours, maybe less. Lenny's conscience won. He slowed his rig, pulled onto the shoulder as much as the snow allowed, and waited. In his mirror, he saw the figure start walking toward the truck, moving with an odd, gliding gait. When the man reached the passenger door, Lenny leaned over and opened it. "Get in before you freeze to death." The man climbed up into the cab, and Lenny got his first good look at him. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and pale skin. He was dry. No snow on his clothes despite standing in the blizzard. His eyes were dark, almost black, and his face was expressionless. "Thank you," the man said. His voice was flat, monotone, like a computer-generated voice. "You're lucky I came along," Lenny said, pulling back onto the highway. "You got a death wish being out here dressed like that." "I've been waiting," the man said. No elaboration, just that simple statement. Lenny waited for him to continue. But the hitchhiker just sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. The cab felt colder with a minute, like the man had brought the outside temperature with him. "Where you headed?" Lenny tried again. "East. Just east." "Okay, I'm going through Lewistown, then on to Billings. I can drop you at either place." The man nodded once but didn't speak. Lenny felt his unease growing. Something was deeply wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what. The hitchhiker sat perfectly still, didn't fidget, didn't adjust his position, barely seemed to breathe. And that cold. It was getting worse. Frost forming on the inside of the windows despite the heater running full blast. About 10 minutes into the drive, Lenny glanced at his passenger side mirror to check traffic. He saw his trailer, the swirling snow, the dark highway, but he didn't see the hitchhiker's reflection. The passenger seat appeared empty in the mirror. Lenny's heart skipped. He looked directly at the man, definitely there, solid, taking up space. But the mirror showed no one. "You got a name?" Try and keep his voice steady. "I did. Once." The hitchhiker turned his head to look at Lenny, and that movement was wrong too. Too smooth, head rotating like it was on a bearing rather than a neck. "You're very kind. Not many stop anymore. Most people have learned." "Learned what?" "Not to pick me up." Lenny felt ice in his stomach. "Who are you?" "I'm what happens to drivers who break their rules." The hitchhiker smiled, and his teeth were wrong. Too many, too sharp. "I died on this road 23 years ago. Froze to death after my car broke down. Stood on the roadside for 6 hours, watching vehicles pass. Dozens of them. No one stopped. So I made a promise to myself right before I died. If I had to stand here forever, I would, and any driver who stopped would join me." Lenny's hands tightened on the wheel. He tried to stay calm, tried to think. "Look, I don't know what you are, but I'm going to pull over and you're going to get out." "Can't do that." The hitchhiker's voice remained that same flat monotone. "We made a transaction. You stopped. You picked me up. The deal is sealed. Now you'll drive until you can't anymore. Until you join the others." "What others?" The hitchhiker pointed ahead, through the swirling snow, illuminated by Lenny's headlights. Figures appeared on both sides of the road. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all standing in the same pose, thumb out, hitchhiking. Some looked recent, wearing modern clothes. Others looked like they'd been there for decades, their clothing from different eras. Their bodies translucent, ghost-like. All of them turned to watch Lenny's truck pass. "They all stopped," the hitchhiker said. "They all broke their rules. They all tried to be kind, and this road took them for it. Kindness is weakness here. Compassion is death." Lenny made a decision. He cranked the wheel hard right, simultaneously hitting the brakes. The truck skidded wildly on the snow-covered highway, trailer jackknifing. The hitchhiker was thrown against the dashboard, and Lenny used that moment to grab the door handle and shove the passenger door open. "Get out! Get out of my truck!" The hitchhiker turned to look at him, that too smooth rotation again, and his face was changing. The features were melting, shifting, becoming something inhuman. You can't throw me out. I'm already part of you. The cold. Can't you feel it? Lenny could. The cold was inside him now, in his bones, in his blood. His breath came out in visible clouds despite the heater. His hands on the wheel were turning blue. He looked down and saw frost spreading across his skin, ice crystals forming on. The hitchhiker was doing this to him, draining his warmth, his life. The truck came to a stop sideways across both lanes. Lenny knew he had maybe seconds. He threw himself out the driver's door, landing hard in the snow, and rolled away from the truck. Behind him, he heard the hitchhiker's voice, no longer flat but angry, layered with multiple voices. You can't escape. You stopped. The deal is made. Lenny ran. His legs barely worked. The cold had gone so deep, but he forced himself to move. He ran back down the highway, away from the truck, away from those figures standing in the snow. Behind him, he heard footsteps, multiple footsteps, all those ghosts giving chase. He didn't look back, couldn't look back. He ran until he saw lights ahead. A truck was coming from the west, heading east. Lenny stumbled into the middle of the highway, waving his arms. The truck slowed, stopped. A woman driver leaned out. What the hell are you doing? You're gonna get killed. Please, Lenny gasped. Give me a ride. Please. The woman looked at him, at his nearly frozen state, and her face showed conflict. Then she shook her head. Can't do it. Got a rule. No hitchhikers. Sorry. She started rolling up her window. Wait. I'm a driver. I have a truck back there. I need help. She paused, studied him more carefully. You got ID? Proof? Lenny fumbled for his wallet with numb fingers, showed her his commercial driver's license. The woman examined it, then nodded. Okay, get in, but I'm calling the cops about your truck. Lenny climbed into her cab, blessed warmth enveloping him. He looked back through the mirrors. The road behind them was empty. No figures, no ghosts, no hitchhiker. Just blowing snow and darkness. The woman radioed for help, and within an hour, state troopers arrived. They found Lenny's truck where he'd left it, trailer jackknifed, doors open. No sign of any passenger. The cab was coated in ice on the inside, frozen solid despite the heater having been running. The temperature inside was measured at minus 40 degrees. The police wrote it up as equipment failure. Heater malfunction. Lenny abandoned the truck to avoid hypothermia. That was the official story. The insurance covered the truck, which had to be totaled due to ice damage to the engine and cab systems. Lenny's cargo was transferred to another driver. He spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from severe hypothermia and frostbite. He lost parts of 3 fingers and 4 toes. When he was released, Lenny quit driving. He told his boss he was done, couldn't do it anymore. His boss tried to convince him to stay, but Lenny was adamant. He sold his commercial license endorsement, took a job in logistics, working from an office. He never told anyone the true story of what happened that night. Who would believe him? But sometimes, especially on cold winter nights, Lenny thinks about that stretch of Highway 200. He thinks about all those figures standing in the snow, waiting for the next kind driver to break their rule, to show compassion, to make the fatal mistake of stopping. He thinks about the woman who picked him up and how her strict rule, no hitchhikers, saved him. And he wonders how many drivers are out there right now, breaking their rules, picking up passengers who cast no reflections. He wonders how many are learning, far too late, that some roads punish kindness, and that survival sometimes means ignoring the voice of conscience that says to help those in need. Story 8. The Way Station That Measured More Than Weight. Sandra Pierce had been an owner-operator for 15 years, hauling specialized cargo across the Southwest. At 48, she prided herself on running a clean operation, keeping her truck maintained, her logs accurate, and her cargo properly secured and documented. She'd been through hundreds of way stations in her career and knew the routine by heart. Pull in when the signs indicate. Wait your turn. Drive onto the scales. Wait for clearance. Move on. Simple, routine, bureaucratic. That August evening, hauling electronics from Phoenix to El Paso, Sandra saw the sign for a way station. All trucks must stop when lights are flashing. The lights were flashing. It was about 10 p.m., dark, and traffic was light. She signaled and took the exit ramp into the way station. This particular station wasn't one she remembered from previous runs on Interstate 10, but that meant nothing. Way stations could be temporary, or she might have simply forgotten it. The station was larger than most, with multiple scale lanes and a substantial building that looked more like an office complex than the usual small structure. Bright lights illuminated everything, harsh and white, giving the place a sterile, clinical feel. Only 2 other trucks were there, both on scales. Sandra pulled into an empty lane and drove onto platform, feeling the familiar slight dip as her truck settled onto the weight sensors. She waited. Normally, a light would turn green or red, indicating whether she needed to go inside or was clear to continue. But this station had a digital display board next to the scale. As Sandra watched, text appeared. Driver exit vehicle. Report to building. Mandatory inspection. Sandra sighed. Mandatory inspections were rare, but not unheard of. Random checks to ensure drivers were following regulations. She grabbed her logbook, her manifest, her registration documents, and headed to the building. The entrance was clearly marked, an automatic door that slid open as she approached. Inside was a lobby that looked more like a hospital waiting room than anything related to transportation. White walls, fluorescent lighting, rows of plastic chairs, and a reception desk with computer terminal. A man in a uniform sat behind the desk. The uniform was wrong, though. Not DOT, not State Highway Patrol, not any insignia Sandra recognized. It was plain gray with a patch that showed some kind of circular logo and text she couldn't quite make out. License, registration, and logbook. The man said without looking up. His voice was flat, bored. Sandra handed over her documents. He scanned them with what looked like a handheld device, then typed something into his computer. The keyboard clicking was the only sound. The building was eerily quiet. Sandra Marie Pierce, owner-operator, clean record, vehicle weight, 72,400 pounds, within limits. He looked up at her. But there are other measurements we need to verify. Other measurements? Like what? Please proceed through door 3 for full inspection. He pointed to a hallway with numbered doors. This is mandatory. Refusal results in immediate impoundment of vehicle and revocation of commercial license. Sandra felt a spike of anxiety, but she was a professional. If they wanted a full inspection, fine. She had nothing to hide. Her truck was clean, her cargo legitimate. She walked down the hallway to door 3. It opened automatically as she approached, revealing a room that looked like some bizarre hybrid of a doctor's office and mechanic's garage. There were examination equipment, computers, a platform like a scale, but more complex. A woman in the same gray uniform was waiting. Please step onto the measurement platform. What are you measuring? Full biometric analysis. Weight, composition, density. Standard procedure. For what? I've been driving 15 years. I've never had a biometric analysis at a weigh station. The woman's expression didn't change. New federal regulations. All drivers must comply. Step onto the platform. Sandra stepped onto it, feeling ridiculous. The platform hummed, lights scanning up and down her body. The woman watched the computer screen, her face illuminated by its glow. She frowned. Irregularity detected. Your density is off specification. My what? Density. Specific gravity. You're measuring at 0.73. Standard human range is 0.95 to 1.1. You're significantly below acceptable. Sandra laughed, though it sounded nervous even to her own ears. That's impossible. I'm standing right here. I'm solid. What are you talking about? It means, the woman said, turning to face her directly, that you're not completely here. Part of you is missing. Part of you exists in another state. Another state? Like another dimension? This is crazy. I'm leaving. Sandra turned toward the door, but it didn't open. She pushed against it. Locked. You can't leave until we resolve the discrepancy, the woman said. Your composition is unstable. You're losing cohesion. When did you first notice the symptoms? I don't have any symptoms. I feel fine. Let me out. Memory gaps? Lost time? Feeling detached from your surroundings? Seeing things that others don't? Sandra stopped. She did have memory gaps. The last 3 days, there were periods she couldn't quite account for. Stretches of road she didn't remember driving. She'd attributed it to fatigue, to the monotony of long-haul driving. And yes, sometimes she felt detached, like she was watching herself from outside her body. But that was stress, wasn't it? What's happening to me? Sandra asked, her voice small. The woman pulled up images on the computer, rotating 3D scans of Sandra's body. Parts of her were translucent in the scans, like she was fading. You drove through a thin place, an area where the boundary between realities is weak. Most people pass through without incident, but sometimes, rarely, someone gets caught in between. Part of you went one way, part went another. You're spreading across multiple realities, becoming less defined in each one. Eventually, you'll fade completely, existing nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Sandra felt panic rising. How do I fix it? How do I stop it? You can't. Once it starts, it's progressive. But we can help manage it. We can stabilize you, keep you functioning in this reality for longer. Who are you people? What is this place? We measure what others don't. We monitor the thin places, the borderlands. We find people like you, people who are slipping away, and we offer a choice. You can leave now, continue driving, continue fading. You probably have a few weeks before you disappear completely. Or you can stay here, work with us, help us monitor and study the phenomenon. In exchange, we can stabilize you indefinitely. You won't be fully human anymore, not entirely present, but you'll persist. Sandra's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. But the scans, the measurements, the memory gaps, it all aligned with what the woman. I need time to think. You have 1 hour. There's a room down the hall where you can wait. After 1 hour, you must decide. The door unlocked with a click. Sandra stumbled into the hallway, her legs weak. She found the waiting room, sat in one of those plastic chairs. Other people were there, other drivers, she assumed. They all had the same translucent quality she'd seen in her scans, like they were projections rather than solid beings. One man looked at her, his eyes sad. You're new. Just found out? Sandra nodded. Is it true? What they said? Yeah, I drove through something near Roswell 2 years ago. Been fading ever since. I chose to stay, work with them. Can't go back to my old life. My family wouldn't recognize me anyway. I'm barely visible to regular people now. There has to be another way. The man shrugged. If you find one, let me know. Some people choose to fade. They say it's not so bad once you let go. You become part of the road itself, part of the landscape. Eternal, in a way. Sandra's hour passed in a blur. She thought about her life, her truck, her routes. She thought about everything she'd worked for. But she also thought about those memory gaps, about how she felt increasingly disconnected from the world. Maybe she'd been fading for longer than she realized. Maybe this was inevitable. When the woman came to get her, Sandra made her choice. I'll take my chances. I'm leaving. The woman nodded, no judgment in her expression. As you wish. Your vehicle is cleared. You're free to go. Sandra walked back through the building, got in her truck, and drove out of the way station. In her mirrors, she watched it recede into the distance. Within a mile, she looked back again. The way station was gone. Just empty desert where it should have been. She continued driving toward El Paso, made her delivery on time. But over the following weeks, Sandra noticed the changes accelerating. Her reflection in mirrors was less distinct. People sometimes looked right through her, as if they didn't see her. Her truck's electronics malfunctioned constantly, and the road itself seemed different, shifting, showing her routes that weren't on any map. 3 months after that night at the way station, Sandra's truck was found abandoned on a remote stretch of interstate, engine running. Cargo intact, no sign of the driver. Search parties found nothing. Security footage from truck stops showed her image becoming progressively more faint in the weeks before her disappearance, until the last footage showed just an empty truck driving itself, no one in the cab. Her family never found her. The official report listed her as missing, presumed dead, but other drivers report seeing a ghost truck on southwestern routes, a rig with no driver that appears in their mirrors and then vanishes. They say if you look closely, you can see a woman's face in the window, barely visible, still driving, cargo across a road that exists between realities. Sandra Pierce is still out there, in a way, neither fully gone nor fully present, a warning about the thin places in the world where travelers can lose themselves, and about the facilities that monitor those strange borders, measuring things that shouldn't be measured, finding things that shouldn't be found.